A short while ago in this series we looked at fractions, and we said, for example, let's suppose that this is a pi. It's not a very round pi, and we divided into two. We have 1 pi divided by, and remember how we sometimes write divided by, we write the number and then a line, and then divided by 2 we write underneath it. We have 1 pi divided into 2 pieces, and so that gives us half a pi, and that's a half. That's the fraction, a half. If we divide this pi into 4 pieces, we now have 1 pi divided into 4 bits. That's a quarter of a pi, and that is a fraction, and it's a quarter. And a quarter of a pi looks, at least a quarter of my pi, which is so badly drawn, looks like that. Okay, so those are fractions. Now remember, this means 1 pi divided into 4 pieces. What is 1 divided by 4? Let's write it the other way. 1 divided by 4. How many 4s go into 1? Well, we can't do it in the normal way. We can, however, do it this way. Let's suppose that, remember how we used to divide, how we divided a little while ago? I put 1 here, and then I do some long division, and I want to divide it by 4. Well, I can't do that, so what I do is I add a whole bunch of zeros onto there, and then I put a little full stop at the bottom. It's like a little period, a little point there, and what that says is, let me just write it again over here, 1 point, that's point, that's what we call it, 0, 0, 0, that means just 1. It means 1, and these are tenths, hundredths, 1,000ths of 1. So we've got 1 1, no 1/10ths of 1, no 100ths of 1, no 1,000ths of 1. Now 4 does not go into 1, so we put a 0 up there. Now next to the 1 we've got a point, so we put the point in there. Now we go back and see if it goes into 10. Well, does 4 go into 10? Yes, it does, 2 times. And what are 2 4s? There are 8. So 8 from 10, because we've got 10 here, easier to say 0.8 from 1.0 is 0.2. 10 subtract 8. Now bring down this 0, and we've got 20, or 0.20. 4 into 20, does that go? Yes, it goes 5 times. And 4 5s are 20, so we're done. So we have here, it doesn't really look very clear, does it? 1 divided by 4, what does that tell us? Let me just change color again. It tells us that 1 divided by 4 equals 0.25. Now, what we call, this is terminology, 1 divided by 4 is a fraction, and it's equal to 0.25, and that is a decimal. Now, the word decimal comes from the old Latin word, an old language used by the ancient Romans, meaning in tens, but we're not going to go into all of that, the meaning of these words. Well, we're going to the meaning of the words, we're not the origin of the words, and all we're going to say is when we write a number out that's smaller than 1 like this, we say it's a fraction, and then we can do it, when we do the division and write it out like this with a point in there, we say that it is a decimal. Okay, now let's just take a look at other decimals. And fractions. Let's see what fractions are equivalent to decimals and vice versa. Let's write down a fraction 1/8. And that's 1 divided by 8. What's that in a decimal? Well, we do the same sort of exercise that we did up here. Let's in fact just do it here. We have 1 and we want to divide it by, so we do this division sign here, divide it by 8, but 8 doesn't go into 1, so we do 1.0000. We can go on doing zeros for as long as we want, but it gets a bit boring to do it more than that. So we don't have 8 doesn't go into 1 a whole number of times, so we put down 0. Now we have a decimal point here. What about 8 into 10? Yes, 8 goes into 10 one time. And what is 8? 1/8, that's 8. Subtract 8 from 10 leaves us 2. Bring down the 0 here. Does 8 go into 20? Yes, it does. 2 times. What are 2 8s? They are 16. 16 from 20 is 4. Bring down another 0. 40. Does 8 go into 40? Yes, it does. 5 times. What are 5 8s? Well, they are 40. So we're done. So 1/8 is equal to what in decimals? Well, it's this. 0.125. And that's simply how you convert fractions to decimals. Absolutely simple and straightforward. I hope you'll agree that it is anyway. Now, when some people talk about fractions, for example, fractional pies like this, instead of saying a half a pie, or as I'm just drawing it in here in blue again, a quarter of a pie, instead of saying a quarter of a pie, you might hear, for example, 25% of a pie. 25% of a pie. Yeah, that looks pretty curious. What on earth does 25% of a pie means? 25% of a pie is equal to a quarter of a pie. How so? Well, 25 per 100%. Cent just means, as in the US currency, for example, cent means 100th. Per 100. 25 per 100. Now that means the per means divided by. 25 divided by 100 is equal, of a pie, is equal to a quarter of a pie. Now, is that true? Let's just check it out. How would we check it out? Well, remember, it's being suggested that these are the same numbers. So first of all, we multiply this left side by 100. 25 divided by 100 multiplied by 100. What does that give us? Yes, indeed, it gives us 25. So we have to do the same over here. 1 divided by 4 multiplied by 100 is simply 100 divided by 4. And how many times does 4 go into 100? Well, it goes into it 25 times. So indeed, we're right. 25 does equal 25. So let me just give myself a nice bright check mark there to just demonstrate how I've got that right. So 25% is the same as a quarter. Now, suppose we have a bag full of, well, not quite full perhaps, but containing, let's suppose 16 balls. 16. In fact, I tell you what, I'm going to change color again. 16 balls. And we want to give, say, 25% of the balls to a friend of ours, Fred, let's call him. 16, so we want to give him 25% of 16. Now the word of in English, when we apply it, when we hear it in maths type situations, generally means times. So 16 balls, and we want 25% of them, times 25%. Now this is a sign here, this strange thing with two zeros with this slopey line means percent. That's just a sign for percent there. So what can we do? Well, remember what 25% is? It's 25 over 100. So what we have, how many balls do we give our little friend Fred? Well, we give him 16 times 25 divided by 100. Now we already know that 25 divided by 100 is a quarter, so we can put it in here. 16 times 1 divided by 4. Now 16 times 1 divided by 4 is simply 16, because 16 times 1 is 16, divided by 4. How many times do 4 go into 16? Well, 4 lots of 4 make up 16. So how many balls of these 16 do we give our little friend Fred? We give him 4 of those balls, those 16 balls that were in our bag.